Hey everyone, and welcome to our first video in the series on the path to the cloud. We put this together because the most common questions we get here at Intel in Canada are from customers wanting to know how to plan their cloud strategy and deployments. We seem to have moved on from the debate about whether or not cloud adoption is a good idea to questions about what workloads do I put there and how do I do it? Now, here at Intel, we've been making the technology which powers the cloud since the launch of it, well, before in fact. And what we wanted to do was share with you some best practices that we've seen. And we thought we could do that by speaking to some true industry experts who've been doing this as long as anyone else, our own Intel IT engineers and architects. Now, what you're not going to hear is product pictures or plugs for Intel technology. Chances are you're a customer already, and if so, we thank you for that. What you are going to hear is real-world practical advice from experts who've been through the challenges from planning to containerization and security. So let's get to it, and we hope you find it useful. I'm joined today by Craig Chvatal and Subbarao Mantha from IT at Intel. Gentlemen, why don't you start by just giving yourselves a short introduction and tell us a little bit about IT at Intel. Craig, let me start with you.
Sure. Hi, my name is Craig Chvatal, and I'm in our Intel IT department. I'm a principal engineer here at Intel, but I'm also director of our enterprise platforms, architecture and governance team. So think of, I'm responsible for all of Intel's business platforms that we run and ensuring that they run well and now and into the future. Thanks.
And Subbarao, how are you doing?
Good, thanks. Hi, I'm Subbarao Mantha. I'm a principal engineer and enterprise architect in Intel IT. I'm responsible for supporting our hire to retire and corporate services domains.
Excellent. What's the size of the Intel IT operation, guys?
It's around 5,000 employees. It's a large IT department, but Intel itself is around 110,000 employees.
That's excellent. And you know what? It's undoubted that Intel is a large enterprise. But what we believe is that many of the principles that we've adhered to will apply as much to a smaller company as they do to ourselves. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Everything we're going to talk about today, we think really could be applied at any size company.
Why don't we start there? What was the process on how to begin when you first started thinking about this?
Sure, I'll take that. Yeah, so the process that we started with was, what is your business strategy, right? And cloud strategy is just an enabler for that business strategy. So you need to work with your business partners and understand what they're trying to achieve. At Intel, for us, it was about greater business agility. It was about enabling increasing business value from IT, and also managing the technical debt that we've accumulated over our almost 52-year history, and managing to that. So that was our focus and reason why we got into the cloud strategy. The first thing we had to do inside of Intel was get a handle on all of the applications. Now, IT inside of Intel manages roughly 2,000 applications and platforms, and it's hard to talk about 2,000 of anything. And so what we first did is we categorized those applications and platforms into something that we affectionately call a logical platform grouping. And it's not a very interesting name per se, but really what it was is that we could put on one page, basically lining up the applications and platforms we have on one page into groupings like sales and marketing, HR business function, finance, supply chain, manufacturing, line of business applications. So there were buckets for that. And then underneath that, we have quite a number of, if you call them like core platforms that get used by every line of business and potentially every application: middleware integration tools, database services, data warehousing services, development frameworks that you would use to build applications. So we have kind of a horizontal layer under that. And then what we did is we placed those applications and platforms into each of those different areas and it allowed us to then group them and talk about them at different paces and maturity levels. So an example might be is finance, the finance applications that would go into that bucket. They need to run Intel and close the books every month end and every quarter. And so it's about, strong processes, it's under SOT or SOX control and that sort of thing. It might move at a different pace than say sales and marketing, which is going to be looking at the latest tools you might need out on the internet, or the latest social media thing where your Intel might want to play in. So they might move at different paces. So by putting things into this logical grouping, it allowed us to start to talk with our business users about those different areas of what things should move faster or slower, what needs to be renovated, and so forth. We then worked inside of Intel IT with senior management and other enterprise architects to say, well, what are our cloud principles? And we first started with, we talk about optimizing the 3 C's. So I'm going to go through a couple of the principles. And the first one is the 3 C's. We call that cost, controls, and capabilities. So we're looking, as part of our cloud strategy as a principle, we want to optimize the cost for what we're running. We want to optimize for controls. Can we put the right controls into the cloud and keep Intel safe and our data safe? And then capabilities. Capabilities is like, are there things that we're doing on premises that we cannot do or won't do fast enough that it's being delivered out on the cloud? A good example of this is machine learning capabilities, machine learning as a service. The cloud providers have moved ahead very quickly. And so the ability to take your data and just call a machine learning algorithm, you can just do in a day or so, which is you would have to develop it all internally. So that's a place where we look at capabilities where it may be different. Now, the second thing in our principles that we looked at is a SaaS first strategy. Now, it's not uncommon for you to hear this, but SaaS solutions are very mature, our software as a service. I can go and rent the solution. We would much rather do that, particularly for business applications that are more commoditized and very much how they run and how they're going to work. Note that even though we say SaaS first, that does not mean SaaS only, right? So don't confuse that with a SaaS first strategy. The third principle is that we prefer agility over flexibility over cost. And that was a very purposeful thing we put in place so that we could just talk about and make sure that on top of our mindset as a principle that we were looking for the agility first, a business agility to deliver over the flexibility and cost. So cost is important, don't get me wrong, but it comes in the third layer after agility and flexibility. And then finally, we also set a principle that vendor lock-in or vendor innovation is over vendor lock-in. So we prefer if somebody's moving very quickly and it's going to stay up with what Intel is looking for capabilities we need in the future, it's okay to, if you will, lock in on a vendor, because of that innovation, if it matches your strategy, and not be so concerned about it as you might have been in the past. Now, one last thing in this section, or in answering your question here, is as we were doing this, one of the questions, and we grouped the applications and we put some principles in place, we were wondering to ourselves, well, what is the right percentage of applications that we should pick up and move or should have in the cloud for a company the size of Intel? And so we actually talked to some analysts, and we asked, is it 40%, 60%, 80%? And the answer we got back was a chuckle, and the analyst said, it's whatever your CIO says it is. And so that actually gave us some freedom, because it is kind of true. Now, what we've done at Intel is we actually have a pretty strong process around how we manage this. And so we can say year over year what we're moving and what percentage we will be, quote, in the cloud. But many times there's proclamations that happen from the CIO, and you go and manage to that as well.
Thanks. That's a great story about the reality of IT functions sometimes. Now, you mentioned about grouping applications. Could you maybe expand a little bit on how we categorize them, what metrics we used, or scoring systems? Perhaps Subbarao, I know you were involved in this process.
Thanks, Phil. We created an application rationalization strategy to go hand in hand with our business transformations already underway. We leveraged Gartner's time model to classify all our applications. Time stands for tolerate, invest, migrate, and eliminate. Applications in the tolerate category typically are in good technical health and providing either stable or slightly declining business value. These applications do not require much work from you to keep them running. Invest category of applications are typically your strategic business capabilities and applications enabling the biggest value to your stakeholders. We want to continue to invest in them to upkeep the health and continue to delivering that value. Migrate category of applications typically have low technical health and delivering medium to high business value. These require immediate attention from you to continue to deliver that value. We classified majority of our applications that we are either modernizing or moving to new application platforms as part of our business architecture technology strategy with this classification. The final category of eliminate, these are applications that either are not really being utilized or the cost to continue to run them versus the value is simply not there. Through our own journey, we identified a significant portion of applications that fell in this category that we were able to retire. In addition to leveraging the logical platform groups that Craig talked about earlier and this time model classification, we also created a modern maturity scoring capability for our business capabilities and platforms that we utilized to prioritize our business investment areas. We also defined the current as is and to be state for each of the applications and capability areas and used it to drive the roadmaps as we move forward. In addition to all this, we also did a thought exercise on if we were to start from scratch, what our application architecture, business application landscape looks like. We called it the no legacy state. And we used that as a reference check to try to accelerate our existing transformation programs.
Thanks. That's a really interesting view of some of the categorization and metrics we've had. I wonder what else then makes an application or workload a candidate for either public, hybrid or on-premise hosting. Craig?
We use 7 main characteristics that we use to decide where the workload should go. And I'll kind of run through them real quickly. The first one is workload type. And if you think about this, is this a predictable workload, an unpredictable workload? Is it increasing rapidly or decreasing rapidly? In putting those two things in together, if it's an unpredictable workload, it may be a good example of where you might want to go into the cloud because it's so easy to scale quickly there. If it's a very predictable workload and it's running something you're running long term, it may be more cheaper and more cost effective to run it on your on-premises installation like you've always had. So workload type, predictable, unpredictable is the first one. The second one is lifespan. If you have an application that you're just going to spin up to do some testing or some work, I mentioned, sales and marketing, the latest social media type of application that you wanted to get something out there very quick, you can spin that up very quickly in the cloud, and if it's going to last for a very short period of time in the lifespan, it's probably a good fit for what you might want to do in the cloud versus doing something in your own data center or on premises. The next one is life cycle. And so life cycle is you're thinking about from the life cycle of a workload. Is it from the beginning to the end to when I actually end that life cycle? I may, particularly if I'm going to have a pattern in the life cycle where I built a new application and I want to scale it. And let's say I want to scale it very, very quickly. And I don't know, again, back to the kind of the predictable and the predictability of the workload type. But if I'm in that life cycle of a ramp and I'm not sure what that's going to look like, it might be quicker to do that out on the cloud. And then after that settles down, when it becomes mature in the life cycle, it's something you could either repatriate back to your on-premises, or you could leave it out there in the cloud. And then we get into the 3 I've mentioned. The controls or security. How can I secure it? Do they have the right controls that I can put in place out at the cloud provider in order to secure that application and the data that uses it? The capabilities. does the cloud provider offer capabilities that I don't have or don't want to invest in, or it'll take me too long to invest in, again, to increase business agility. And then cost, again, the cost, I mentioned it wasn't the first reason why you would go to the cloud, but it is something that's important. We do look at our 5-year total cost of what it would cost to run something. And, the first piece is if an application is going to run for 5 years, you need to factor that in. And if it's only going to run for 1 year, then that becomes a different decision on how you look at it. So that's something to consider. And then finally, and probably most important, is as you're first moving to the cloud, is you need to look at your talent pool. And are they ready? Are they cloud ready to start building this idea of cloud native applications? And take a look at your talent pool. Definitely something where you need to upskill your work pool.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I know you started the session by talking about, aligning with the business, and many of those features you've just described, like predictability, lifespan, life cycle, kind of brings us back to that business alignment. Yeah, really interesting stuff. So what were the most important lessons you learned? Either Craig or Subbarao, perhaps take that question.
Yeah, I have a couple. The first one is start small, identify applications that deliver highest customer value that you are not able to deliver based on your current architecture. Do proof of concepts and use this as an opportunity to upskill your talent workforce and establish your architecture reference patterns and blueprints. And once you show those quick wins, that allows you to build up momentum and get other organizations, both within IT and business, aligned to increase the movement on this. The second area we found is your current legacy state, as we call it, the state of your current applications, has a significant impact on the pace at which you can execute your cloud strategy. So some groups may have very little dependencies, and on those applications can be modernized and migrated to the cloud much faster compared to some of your critical, like ERP-based applications that would require much more hand-holding and coordination across different stakeholder groups.
Some of the ones I'd like to add that he didn't mention, one of the things we learned was data gravity is a very key consideration. So think of data gravity as either the system that's producing a significant amount of data that's used heavily across the organization, or maybe it's a data warehouse where I'm actually sending data to it. And as you get into looking at your own cloud strategy, one of the things you'll find with the cloud service providers is they all have egress costs. So there's costs to actually take the data back out. So if you have a system that is either creating a significant amount of data that then needs to send it on to a bunch of other systems, or there's a ton of interaction going on between those systems, and if you split those between your on-premises and your cloud solution, you're going to have a lot of back and forth, and you need to keep aligned to your costs you want to spend for egress fees. So one of the key learnings was in this data gravity, particularly kind of a funny moment, was when we did this no legacy approach that Subbarao mentioned. One of the things I did is I said, well, I'm going to take our ERP solution, and what if we were to move that to the cloud and the no legacy approach? And it's all of the other segment architects in the room said, well, wait a minute, if ERP is going, that's kind of the center of the universe, the heartbeat for Intel. We need to move our applications there as well. So because just simply alone on the egress and the data gravity aspect of it. So definitely something, a key learning to keep in mind. The other one is one I just mentioned a minute ago, which is upskill your talent pool to think cloud and execute to a cloud strategy. There's a saying that says, cloud is a way of life thinking. And so you need to get people into that way of life thinking or lifestyle choice. So get them into that. And again, lots of training and certification programs available today. And then, finally, one of the other key learnings is designed for cost monitoring up front. It's very easy just to go out to the cloud and spin up and not think about it, because it's so easy for developers to do something, and the agility you get is phenomenal. But it's amazing, both at Intel and other companies that I talk to. I talk to a lot of companies. Is one of the things is that like in years 1 and 2, it's a huge move to the cloud, and then in years 3 and 4, all of the directors have have a cost item in their plan so that they, to control costs because they're using so much of it. So think about that up front so you can control that in the beginning. Those are some of the things I'd add.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, cost control, cost optimization is a consistent theme, as is now organizational design of your talent pool, which I know you've mentioned twice. Thanks for that. Let me ask you a difficult one. If you had the option to share only one thing, just one thing with customers planning this, what would that be?
Sure. Your cloud strategy should really be driven by your business strategy and supported by a talent strategy for you to scale and execute faster. Executive alignment on the value, how you are measuring the value that you are delivering compared to the cost, and expectations on the pace at which you are going to go deliver that is going to be critical for success going forward.
For me is remember, this is a journey to the cloud. And one of the key things we've learned is that, architecture still matters. You still have to plan, and you have to plan for resiliency and high availability and how you're going to architect between different zones and all those things. So you still need to do all that work. Now, the cloud providers will help you. They have templates and things and best practices, but you really need to do it right. You need to think through it. You don't just pick it up and move it. And, there's a saying or funny saying, it's like, you don't want to move your problems to the cloud. So keep that in mind as you're looking at all these new things. Do it right, or do it with the best practices that are out there. And remember, it's a journey in doing so.
Yeah, that's great advice. Very useful. So in your interactions with customers, and I know that at Intel and the IT function, you spend a lot of time, sharing these best practices with customers. What's top of mind for them? What do you most get asked?
Probably the top question is, well, wait a minute, we're not the size of Intel. How can we enable a cloud strategy and do this work? What we do want to stress is the things we're outlining here, again, at a very high level, is that they can be done by a company of any size. And so it's planning and some architecture work and aligning to your business strategy. You can be successful with this.
Thanks to both of you. I think that's been a really good overview of some of the planning, some of the application considerations that you've undergone. Where is the journey taking you next?
I would say we are going to focus on enabling or refining our blueprints from an architecture standpoint to allow our application developer community to adapt and execute to our cloud strategy to deliver business value faster. In addition, to support our Intel's IDM 2.0 strategy, we'll be looking at disruptive innovation, leveraging our cloud strategy, refining it as necessary to deliver to the vision that our CEO has set forward for us.
Thank you both for sharing your experience and expertise there. I do hope you found it useful. If you did, please consider joining us for future episodes as we cover security, containerization, and other aspects of cloud deployment. Thanks for watching.